Every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday. Tuesday, Casual Tuesday. Wednesday, Casual Hump Day. Thursday, Casual Thurs. That's what we call it. And Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, April 4th, 2025. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, David Dayen, executive editor of The Prospect, host of the podcast Organized Money, or co-host, I should say. And we're going to be doing a simulcast with the American Prospects Weekly Roundup with David Dayen. Also on the program, Trump tariffs launch a global trade war as the rest of the world responds. Following passage of that budget bill that Chuck Schumer voted for, lawmakers seek to regain tariff authority they lost in that bill. South Korean court upholds impeachment of now former President Yoon. Really former. Trump fires the head of the NSA and U.S. Cyber Command at the behest of Laura Loomer. Yes, that Laura Loomer. RFK Jr. says they mistakenly fired 20% of the people who are key to U.S. health.
Whoopsie.
Senate moves closer to passing a one big, horrendous reconciliation bill, passing a resolution yesterday. Senate also confirms Dr. Oz to lead Medicare and Medicaid. Some fun news. Poll taken in New York State. AOC leads Chuck Schumer in a head-to-head primary matchup by double digits. No word from the Baileys on whether they were polled. Trump targets Brown University, pausing $500 million in grants over last year's Gaza protests. Doge targeting Social Security for more cuts. Only 15 Democrats voted to cancel Israeli aid. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It was a little abrupt. It was less abrupt. Okay, it sounded abrupt here. Emma is out today. Also, to get your fix of Emma, after this show, of course, head over to Pod Save America. And Emma was a guest on that program.
She was on a Midas Touch show recently, too. She's doing all the rounds.
She's all over the place. I was on the Patrick Bet David show
It's a little bit more my speed. I like to be screamed at by a red-faced guy.
Oh, my God. I honestly thought it was going to be like one of those situations where the vein pops open, the blood spurts on me. We'll go. I haven't even watched it. I don't even know what the clips are. But there was one thing that I wanted to talk about with them that they allowed me to talk about for about 3 minutes, and then with the four of them, got me to off that topic onto the next insane topic. But we'll cover that later in the fun half of the program. And just two things I wanted to mention. In the first half. One is on Saturday, there is a big sort of national protest that's taking place. You can head to handsoff2025.com, handsoff2025.com. We'll put that link in the podcast and YouTube description. It is people protesting the assault on our government by a billionaire, literally. So check that out. Also, I just wanted to do a shout out to Isaac Liebler, who's been working on the show now for, I think really basically since we came back from COVID. They've been helping us out with really our social media game and have done a wonderful job in getting us out there. Instagram, TikTok. Apparently this is what the kids view these days, TikTok and Instagram. And we still post stuff on Facebook, although, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't particularly care for political content of our ilk. But,
Twitter apparently outs you as a elder millennial, apparently.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, regardless, wanted to thank Isaac for all their work on this program. Very much appreciated. And now let's get to what is going on today. People may have noticed that the stock market tanked yesterday. It's back to I think September 2024 levels. There's a lot of stock market people who are upset, but and of course this is just another prime example of why you may not want all of your eggs in the 401k basket. The last time we had a stock market crash like this was during COVID, but of course that was, to a large extent, that was because people weren't sure what was going to happen. Prior to that, it was the 2008 financial crisis. It took about 5 or 6 years for the stock market to return to 2008 levels. I don't think it did maybe until 2014. And if you had decided and been anticipating retiring at age 65, you may have had to wait until you were 70, or you may have had a lot less money than you had anticipated. So the stock market, obviously important in the lives of a lot of people, particularly obviously people who are looking to retire, but it makes the importance of Social Security that much more obvious. Social Security, it is completely within our control how much money you will get when you hit retirement age. But really, the real problem with the tariffs is ultimately going to be the inflation that it causes. And then the rejiggering of the relationship the United States has with the rest of the world. Because, you get a couple mulligans, but at one point the rest of the world goes, they're insane. And we don't necessarily need them as much as they think we do. Obviously, we have a big consumer base, but if we make their products 50% higher overnight, that consumer base is really not terribly relevant to them. We'll talk more about this with David Dayen, but this is, and Dayen has a theory that these aren't even really tariffs. They're just sort of some type of vindictive punishment, or there is no cohesive policy around this. And as I tried to explain to the four numbnuts yesterday, you can have a tariff. Tariffs can be effective if you have an overall plan to build an industry, or maybe even a region of the country, for instance, based upon what they consume. And you have all of these different efforts to build out an industry, they can make sense. But there's no rhyme or reason to any of what is being done here. But we'll talk more about that with David Dayen. But here is what's fascinating is to watch the members of this administration. There's obviously a couple who believe in this to create some type of world dominance, or I don't know what it is. But Scott Bessent was like a sort of a more or less a normie financial guy at one point. God knows what happened to his brain, but it's hard to imagine this guy believes the things he's saying now. And we'll get to Howard Lutnick, the same thing. It's hard to imagine these guys are believing what they're saying. This is beyond putting a lipstick on a pig. It's not fair to the pig in this instance. But here's Besant talking out in front of the White House to Brett Baer.
Down across the board. People are looking at their 401ks and they worry about it. What do you say to them tonight?
Brett, I say that what we are doing is we're setting the stage for long-term economic growth, that we were on our way to a financial crisis. I used to teach a history of financial crises, and with that gigantic government spending, it was unsustainable. You look back in 1998, you look back in '07, right before it looked great, everything collapsed. So, it looked great right before everything collapsed. So we have taken us off that trajectory, and we are putting ourselves back onto a sound trajectory.
Okay, wait a second. We may have to listen to this again. Brett Baer is saying your tariffs have tanked the stock market. This guy's saying we were headed towards a crash. And how do you know? Because things look good. And before there was a crash, before things looked good. So in this instance, and the reason why we're headed for a crash is because our government debt, which incidentally is absolutely in no way, in zero way, helped by these tariffs. Because one of two things happens. Either we have massive inflation because people just keep buying these products, and that supposedly funds the government, which of course they're going to do tax cuts, so it's all going to get offset anyways. Or it's just, or people don't buy these products. They try and find others, which of course there's upward pressure on those prices, because I got news for you. There may be a couple of industries, Trump threatened the car manufacturers with this, but just about in every other industry, if they know their competition is costing 50% more, guess what they know? We can raise it 5% and we're going to look like we're the good guys. So this whole theory is just bizarro. Play this again. Listen carefully to what he's saying. He's not responding to the question. And then he's saying, the way you know a crash is coming, it's because everything looks good.
98, you look back in '07, right before it looked great, everything collapsed. So, it looked great right before everything collapsed. So we have taken us off that trajectory, and we are putting ourselves back onto a sound trajectory.
You said 10% over 10 years would be $2.5 trillion coming in. You look at this list of all these countries, and there's some policy decisions here. China is at 34%, added to the 20% already, so that's 54% on Chinese goods.
Yes.
Are they going to come back with something big?
Well, we'll see what they do. Is my advice to every country right now is do not retaliate, sit back, take it in. Let's see how it goes. Because if you retaliate, there will be escalation. If you don't retaliate,
now, this is honestly particularly with Donald Trump, who incidentally was found civically liable for sexually assaulting a woman. It was in a court of law. I report. You decide. This guy basically saying, we are attacking all of these countries. And I would tell them, lay back, just take it in. That's what he says. Take it in. Let's see what happens. Now, I don't know if that's his way of trying to signal to other countries, we're doing our best to take the Mad King off the ledge here. And we're hoping to roll back all this stuff. It's hard to know what he's talking about there. These guys are all panicked. They're all panicked. I don't know if they didn't think that Trump was going to do it, or if they did. I don't know.
I think some of them, they're saying, that implies to me that what Ted Cruz is saying is, I hope these don't last forever, and this is just a moment. But you have half the administration saying, no, this is the new status quo.
Well, we will talk to David Dayen about this and more. Maybe we'll play that Howard Lutnick clip with Dayen so that we can share the laughter and the crying. First, a couple words from our sponsor. Oh, that reminds me. I left it in the fridge. Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online. We got Liquid IV. I want to just grab me one of those bottles. I think it's in the fridge. Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the U.S. with more than 10,000 different kinds of plants and over 2 million happy customers in the U.S. I have been using Fast Growing Trees for almost 15 years now. Maybe more, actually. And then they came and decided to be advertisers here. No, I don't think they realized that I was one of their clients. Well, not clients, customers, I guess. And folks, one of the great things with Fast Growing Trees is now that avocados are going to cost basically the amount of what a compact car did the other day, you can grow your own avocados, you can grow your own lemons, your own olives, your own fig trees, literally inside your house. Small house plant. You can also, of course, put these in your yard. Fast Growing Trees has all these and much, much more. The experts at Fast Growing Trees curate thousands of plants so you can find the perfect fit for your climate, your location, your needs. You want privacy, you want shade, you want fruit trees. They got it all. Much better than going to a big box store. You don't get dirt in the back of your Subaru. You don't get you don't break the trees. You don't get a choice of like 2 different apple trees. No, they have a wide array of trees. Korean pears. I mean, everything. You can talk to their plant expert about your soil type, your landscape design, how to take care of your plants, everything else you need. No green thumb required. And that advice is available 24/7. This spring, they have the best deals online, up to half on select plants and other deals. Listeners to our show get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using the code MAJORITY at checkout. That's an additional 15% off. FastGrowingTrees.com. Using the code MAJORITY at checkout. FastGrowingTrees.com. Code MAJORITY. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. We'll put the link in the podcast and YouTube description. Also, today, this show is sponsored by Liquid IV. This is literally the only day that has been in ages. I was completely discombobulated. I don't have my bottle of Liquid IV, which is standing, the bottle's over there. I haven't been able to fill it up. I just got in. I was so hyped up. But every day when I am sitting at this desk, I have at least 1 bottle of water with Liquid IV. More times than not these days, it is their new sugar-free varieties that they have. And more times than not, it's the raspberry lemonade. They also have raspberry melon. They also have white peach, rainbow sherbet for sugar-free flavors. But what is Liquid IV? It is basically a way to get significantly better hydration than just water alone. They got flavors like I say, the sugar-free raspberry lemonade. They've got flavors like acai berry and lemon lime and pina colada. The hydration multipliers there. I took one of these down to Florida for that Patrick Bet-David thing because I wake up in the morning, I want to get hydrated. You can break the mold and create your own ritual. Just 1 stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. It's powered by LIV Hydroscience, which is an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. Comes in small packets, easy to travel with, easy to put in your backpack for the day. Check it out. Embrace your ritual with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com. Use the code MajorityRep at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MajorityRep at liquidiv.com. Check out the link in the podcast and YouTube description. Quick break, and then we'll be back with David Dayen. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland off today. Joining me now, the executive editor of the American Prospect, the co-host of the podcast Organized Money, and also, most importantly for right now, the host of Prospect's Weekly Roundup, which we are simulcasting as we speak.
Indeed. Your efforts to crush our tiny little show have not succeeded. I just
We've
want to say that.
subsumed you. It's like
it's weird that you think you can control time. Like you're not allowed to have another progressive show the 15 hours a day that you post these
we
things.
are only on for 3 hours a day.
You're like Johnny Carson of the progressive blogging community here. Why did you call me and say I can't have a guest on 30 days before or 10 days after your show?
It was actually supposed to be 30 days after. 30 and 30. That's the way we operate around
30
here.
30 and 30 is the way you do it?
Yeah, that's the way we do it. That actually, you're joking, but there have been people in this space who got very, very upset just about people having a guest on.
Oh, that's an old Carson thing, right? He would tell the Letterman, like, you can't have the same guest on.
Yeah. Well, we don't have that policy here. So it's great to see you.
You're a ruthless dictator, but thank you for having me. This is, I should say, we do a little 1 hour roundup on Friday afternoons from 12:30 to 1:30 usually. And we take questions in our YouTube chat. So questions might come out.
Great.
As we're talking about this, I'll bring them to you. I'm happy to be here. I mean, I don't get to do the Fridays.
Well, that's why I've asked you to move. That's the only reason why I asked you to move it to
that's why I demanded
start it at 1:30.
That
way you can come on this show first.
Demanding that we change the time. That was weird. I thought we were friends, but anyway, let's move
Well, that's
on.
why I had my lawyer do it, and I didn't want it to impact our relationship.
You can't see the lawyer imperiously standing over me right now, forcing me to do this show. But I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad that we. Of course, we did the same thing with our law firm, where they have to give us $100 million worth of pro bono work. But
that's right.
All right,
that's right.
Let's get into this. You wrote a couple of pieces. Well, there's two pieces I wanted to talk to you about. It's the last two pieces you've written, frankly, because it's basically what we've been talking about. The most recent one, no personnel is policy, is what we've been talking about here for months, since the inauguration, essentially. But let's start with the piece you wrote yesterday about the tariffs. We just played a clip of Scott Bessent, or Besant, as I like to call him, whose explanation of the tariffs was something to the effect of, like, our federal debt is out of control. I guess the implication being that we're going to raise so much money from tariffs that we're going to pay money, that our federal debt is so out of control that we're probably headed for a crash. And the way that you know it is because things were going well, and that often the crashes happen.
There are only two states of being: going well or crash. And so he is correct. It has to be true that you're going well before the crash.
It's literally like saying, I've studied car crashes, and every time before a car crash, a car was moving. So
that's right. As night follows day, crash follows good times.
And people are out there trying to, first of all, like, we had the media saying these are reciprocal tariffs. They're not. The numbers that were presented really are not tariffs that are levied on the U.S. It was, they took the goods, the trade deficit that we had with any other country. They divided that by the amount of goods. They didn't count services, which should be included within the context of trade calculations, and then just came up with a new number that they said was a tariff, and then we imposed that tariff, and they're called reciprocal.
It's even worse than that, because the numbers that they use display a surplus to places like like a trade surplus with the Netherlands and Hong Kong and Singapore, and that's only because they have ports. That's the reason that there's an alleged surplus of goods coming in from the U.S. to those countries, because they literally land in those countries before going out to the rest of the world. That's how they
I was reading that they sort of plugged it into like Grok or something and tried to. I mean, that's
there are several AI chatbots where if you ask them what's an easy way to do tariffs, this is their answer.
So they've levied these tariffs. They're going to start. Give us your take on what these are, because they're not really. I mean, you have written extensively, as well and as accessibly as anybody I know, about the Biden administration's industrial policy moves through the IRA, through the CHIPS Act, and to some extent to the American Rescue Act, where they're trying to build an industry in this country. And
by the way, those did include tariffs. There were targeted tariffs on China. There were also some targeted tariffs on steel and aluminum. And some of them were carried over from the first Trump administration, and they were paired with an actual industrial strategy that allows for a transition, because factories aren't magically, conjured up overnight to deal with a tariff situation. They offer incentives to build. They are targeted at specific critical industries that are seen as advantageous for the country. And that pairing was wildly successful. We actually cracked this code during the Biden administration. Manufacturing construction, I should say, the building of plants and facilities went through the roof after 2022's passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. Those factories are starting to come online. The top 5 semiconductor makers in the world all have locations in the United States, the only country in the world where that's the case. And we were on our way. And we ran this thing from Joe Biden, if you remember, at the end of his term. It's kind of saying this is this is a hinge point, is basically what he said at the end. If we follow my policies, we're going to have this strategy be fully realized. Whoops.
I mean, not only did Trump just issue tariffs that have nothing to do with anything, really. I mean, but he also started to attack the chips, the programs from the chips in the IRA, just because. Yeah. Because.
I mean, the funny thing is that because the CHIPS Act is new, it came out in 2022, and they didn't start hiring, the people who would run the program office that would determine who gets funds and monitor the progress. They didn't start hiring those people until maybe 2023, 2024. Large numbers of that office were probationary employees, and they all got fired at the beginning when the probationary employees were fired. So something like 2/5 of the entire CHIPS office was fired.
Great. That's good news.
It's good to know.
Okay. So Trump's tariffs are not part of an industrial policy. They almost don't even, some people try and sell it that way. It seems like in the administration, they also sell it as Trump seems to sell it as a revenue generator, but this is the equivalent of saying, like, when in New York City, they raised cigarette taxes by like $10. And so a pack of cigarettes now costs like $25. The idea was to discourage smoking. If you raised a ton of money from this, your policy agenda failed because you didn't discourage smoking. The analogy in this would be you'd create industry.
Any kind of Govian tax, which is the term for a tax on something you want less of, that you want to discourage, you cannot use those to rely, those cannot be the basis for your entire revenue collection system. Because if you want less of them, you're going to get less of them if it succeeds, which means you're not going to be able to fund your country.
And it also means that there's going to be a lot of inflation, because not just because those products themselves are expensive, but if I'm paying 25% more for a shirt made in 54% more for a shirt made in China, U.S. shirt makers are going to say, like, we got a little bit of wiggle room here to raise our prices.
Well, just to be clear, you're not going to pay 54% more on a shirt because of these tariffs. These are tariffs on the cost of an import at wholesale rates, a wholesale value. And then there's a markup attached to that, and then it goes out to retail. It's going to be far less than that in terms of what the American consumer feels. It's still going to be significant, but it's not going to be a 54% increase in shirt.
Well, we can calculate it this way. If they think that it's going to raise $600 billion a year, that's $5,000 per household in this country.
You can absolutely use that as a benchmark if you think, in fact, that there won't be retaliatory tariffs, if you don't think there will be lower volume. I don't think there's any reason to believe Peter Navarro's back of the envelope claim about $600 billion a year. It's still going to be significant, obviously. And when you do these across the board, you're putting tariffs on things that we don't have the capacity to build in this country, that we can't build because of our climate. You can't grow bananas at scale in this country.
Okay.
Unless you basically clear cut Hawaii and turn it into a banana plant. That's about the only way you
I
can
just
do
did
it.
an ad for Fast Growing Trees. People can grow their own avocados in their apartment. So
I was told about that.
Yeah.
Do we get a cut of that now because we simulcast that ad?
You'll get an avocado.
We'll get some.
Which
we'll
would be
check that
probably
with
far greater.
I'll ask the lawyer that's here that's forcing me to do this show.
But the idea being that there is a lot of products that we wouldn't even want to try and build the industry in this country because we don't have. It's just simply not. I don't know. Like, our lumber industry is about as big as it's going to get. We don't have the forest that Canada has.
And more to the point, it's a question of time, right? So there is a world in which tariffs and incentives can create a situation where we have a successful reindustrialization strategy, but it takes probably 3-4 years to build those factories, and imposing the tariffs immediately and not phasing them in, it's going to create this near-term economic pain. The truth is that we have an economy that's too financialized. It's based on services primarily. We've hollowed out our industrial base to the extent that it's somewhat of a national security problem. All of these are true, but we actually figured out how to deal with that.
Right. It's an industrial policy, which tariffs is a part of. This blanket tariffs is exactly not how you would do it, it seems to me.
But we were getting to the point, which is, I don't think it's even worth calling these tariffs. They're illegitimately derived. They are nonsensical in their execution. One thing to look out for, by the way, is that the implementation of this is going to be a mess. We don't have enough customs officials to implement these tariffs, to know everything on the schedule. And there's going to be a huge backup at the ports next week is what I'm thinking. But anyway, let's set all that aside. These aren't tariffs. They are attempts to gain leverage over every country in the world, because this is the way Donald Trump operates. He has imposed a cost on every country, even ones only inhabited by penguins. And he is saying to the rest of the world, come at me, tell me what you'll give me in order for me to lift this economic pain off your country. And that may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen next week. But he thinks it's going to happen. The question is, is the United States indispensable enough that if the rest of the world kind of gangs up against them, will this actually play out? But I'm saying what's in Trump's mind is that he is a mob boss who goes to Main Street and kicks in the door and says, it's going to be a problem for you if you don't pay me protection money. And I'll give you a couple days to think about this, but you're going to have to come up with a way to. I run this street now, and you're going to have to come up with a way to figure out how to compensate me. That's what's going on. That's his mentality.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, and a good friend of the show, Guy Lawson, who has written a lot about the mobs. He said very early on, he said, if you want to know how this is going to work, look at the way that organized crime is structured. But here's the thing that is unclear. What is it that what's the ask? I get it when the mob boss comes busted in through the door in your laundromat and says, "Hey, this place could burn down if I don't get $150 a week or whatever it is." What is he asking for of the the Canary Islands?
I think it could be a number of different asks, and they could be geopolitical in nature. We want you to protect our interests abroad. They could be very specific, like there's a company here that you're not letting in our cars, and you need to let in our cars. So there could be a corrupt version of this where it's just forcing markets open for favored businesses.
Right.
It could be personal. It could be give me $1 billion. I wouldn't put that past Donald Trump. It could be a number of things. And there's optionality to it in Trump's mind. If you look at Besant, I wrote this 6 months ago, actually. If you look at Besant and what he actually believes, there was this great interview where he talks about putting every country in the world into a box. And the box is either red, yellow, or green. And the green box means you don't have any tariffs, or you have very low tariffs, or something like that. The yellow box is you're doing something we don't like, whatever that is, and we're going to put a higher tariff on you because you're in the yellow box. And the red box is even worse. That's we're going to really mess with your economy. And you can negotiate with us to move boxes, to move into the yellow box, move into the green box. But this is where we're going to situate you right now. And I see Liberation Day as the moving of countries into boxes. And now we'll see if they can climb their way out of them.
If the countries decide to climb their way out of them, or basically just say, we will start to reorient in a different direction.
Right. That'll take time and it'll be painful. Or, the shortcut to that is, oh yeah, you put tariffs on us, we'll put tariffs on you. And that becomes a trade war, which is really bad for citizens, but it's kind of a geopolitical power play, and we're caught up in it.
We're seeing that supposedly. I think it just was breaking this morning that China is issuing tariffs against it, and then we're going to see this with the farmers. And so, are we going to just see? We just start to see the Trump administration now bail out the different industries that are to shore up like our end of this trade war. And
well, he did that. He did that in his first term.
Right.
He used a Roosevelt era program to just give cash to farmers who were having various difficulties, particularly during COVID. He just gave like $60 billion to farmers using a Roosevelt program. It was a wild thing that was vastly underreported. I have a question from our chat, actually.
Sure.
From Jared. He's asked, how is the de minimis loophole changing? Which this is actually a really interesting part of this whole thing. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but right now, 1 billion products a year come into this country, most of them from China, most of them from e-commerce companies in China like Shein and Temu, under what is known as the de minimis loophole. And a de minimis package is characterized in this country as a package under $600. Used to be far less than that, but there was a law that was changed about 10 years ago, I believe, to raise the threshold of de minimis. Those packages come in without tariffs, without any kind of inspection. And it is a way that we have accelerated this sort of e-commerce drop shipping direct from China to a consumer. And they come in at a lower mail rate too, which is actually kind of fun. So none of this is reflected in the balance of trade, by the way. So, whatever our trade deficit is, multiply it by 1 billion packages, which are allegedly under $600. We don't know what's in the packages because we don't inspect them, but they're valued at less than $600. I don't know that anything is going to change with that. There was a fake crackdown that Trump did on de minimis packages about a month ago. But because of the way in which it was structured, it doesn't really change anything. And in fact, what we saw, I just talked about how the ports got clogged or where they might get clogged next week. They tried to change the de minimis loophole wholesale and say, nope, everything's got to be inspected. Everything's got to be checked for a tariff. And within 2 days, there were like 1 million de minimis packages at the ports. And they said, forget that, just let them go. And so I don't know that this changes that. And in fact, that might be an arbitrage strategy. There are countries that might say, oh, okay, so if I give you $1 million order, that's going to be tariff. But if I give you $10,500 orders, that's not.
So we're yet to see how people are going to react to this. Businesses, I mean, is there, like, let's say Trump starts to hand out waivers here and there, because that also feels like what people have anticipated to get either the personal favors or whatever. Everybody comes. Laura Loomer comes in and says, she wanted, a villa somewhere, and maybe, I don't know.
It's not an if, by the way. The American Petroleum Institute came out the day of Liberation Day and said, hey, thank you, Donald Trump, for not including oil and gas.
Right. And he said that he went in front of them and said, give me $1 billion and I'll save you guys. And so bingo.
And he did.
Yep.
And he did.
What about like the implications of this on the economy, in the sense that, like, it feels like there's a lot of companies who are not going to be able to curry favor with Trump. Maybe every country will and whatnot, and maybe there won't be a trade war. That's like all, I guess, theoretically the best case scenario. But you have like the entire country sort of going, I'm hitting pause on everything right now. Like, I'm not going to buy a car. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that.
In fact, I'd say two things. First of all, we actually saw a surge in that kind of durable goods purchases in March.
So people, so buying in anticipation. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of moving forward. In fact, we had a decent jobs report here in March, and I would say that at least part of that is because consumer spending was probably higher than anticipated in March, because people were expecting Liberation Day to come down the pipe. So that's number one. Number two, the best case scenario is actually this. The best case scenario is that Congress recognizes that they actually have the power to stop this. There's no inherent tariff power in the hands of the president. It's all been delegated under these emergency laws. And
wasn't it
like
delegated also through the dirty continuing resolution? Didn't that also sort of like
there was a question of whether or not in the continuing resolution, at least in the House, whether or not they could disapprove of certain tariffs or things like that. But rules are made to be broken. I mean, you can't really bind a future Congress. You can't bind.
No, but they did it as a political matter to give them cover.
They did. But the Senate already the same day as Trump announced these tariffs, the Senate disapproved of the emergency declaration that was put on Canada for various Canadian tariffs. And that passed the Senate, the Republican-led Senate, 51-47, with 4 Republicans joining all the Democrats. And I think, if this gets really bad, and, judging from where we're at with stock markets and expectations of layoffs and things like that, it really could. I think that Republicans might go ahead and think about, making some changes here. And they have every power to do that. And so that would be the best case scenario for a couple of reasons. The biggest one would be sort of the end of this assumed dictatorial regime that we've seen over the last several months. And certainly Republicans have every political reason to defy the president on this. I mean, especially if they do it in numbers. He can't do 150 primary campaigns or however many. If they do it in sufficient numbers, it kind of ends the sort of luster of the president as the only policy-making individual in the government.
And I would imagine too, after Wisconsin, the incentive structure or the threshold window has changed a little bit for some of these Republicans, because the threat of Musk and Trump seems at least somewhat diminished, at least during the midterms and whatnot. Would the president Would the president have to sign any type of legislation that came out of the House and the Senate to curb his tariffs, or no?
Sure, but when you're talking about something that every Democrat is going to pass, and that Republicans will realize, well, there's only safety in numbers, then that 2/3 veto override threshold starts to become attractive.
Let's talk about, I don't know, Wisconsin on some level in particular, and also what we saw in Florida, for the most part, speak for themselves. I mean, there's a huge gains in these Florida districts. Not that there's ever going to be a time where a Democrat's going to control them, but consistent with what we saw in that Pennsylvania special election, consistent with what we saw in this Wisconsin election. That is, even with Musk generating, and it wasn't even so much his money, although that was a big part of it, but the earned media he had by giving away, like doing a lot of bribery. I don't know what you would call that for somebody who had voted. How much are we going to see? Like, what are the implications of that going to be? And then I want to also talk about the budget resolution, the reconciliation bill.
Oh, great. Well, first of all, I can't believe we're talking about politics. I can't believe we're 25 minutes into the show and you haven't mentioned the poll showing AOC beating Chuck Schumer.
I headlined with that. I headlined with that. I headlined with that at the beginning of the show. Are you kidding?
Because that's your favorite thing.
No, I have that. I have that poll tattooed, like right underneath my.
You got it real quick.
Yeah, I got it tattooed right underneath here.
Nice. We won't look at that. So
no, not on the simulcast. We're not giving away that for free.
No, hey, this is a family weekly roundup we have here. Okay, so look at the aggregate swing of these special elections relative to the 2024 general election baseline. You look at the ones in Florida and maybe the statewide race in Wisconsin, you're talking about something anywhere between 12 and even 22 points, yep. I think is the number. So, let's say it's even half that. Like let's say it's half of the midpoint of that. You got an 8-point swing or a 6, 7, 8 point swing, something like that. That puts like 60 House seats in play immediately. Maybe 100 if it's a swing that's closer to what we saw in these elections. And so that's got to weigh on the minds of a non-trivial number of Republican House members. It certainly looks like the more Musk earned media there was, the worse he did. There were 2 statewide elections in Wisconsin. One that got all the attention, the state Supreme Court race, and one that got no attention and no money.
Voter
and that
ID.
was the state. No. There was another statewide individual race. It was the state superintendent of public instruction race. And
I was not following that one.
Right. So that one was kind of a normal midterm swing where the woman won by 5 points, the Democrat. She was an incumbent, and she won by something like 5 points. And that had no attention. The one where Musk gave it all the attention, state Supreme Court, the Democrat wins by 10 points.
Right.
So Musk is literally a negative factor on the outcomes for his favored candidates. And he has said he's not going anywhere, and he's going to double down and continue to spend. And Democrats across the country are saying, thank God for that, because it seems like the more exposure there is on a political level to Elon Musk, the worse his candidates do. And
that's why there's been all those ketamine care packages being sent to D.C.
Indeed.
Get
care of the executive office building. Yeah.
You got to keep Elon Musk fueled to head out these elections. All right, let's talk about what's going on in with the budget resolution, because and just to explain to people, there is a way
with the Schumer thing. Does this mean you're not running against Schumer? Then you're going to let AOC do it?
Well, we'll get to that. I'm not. It's a ways off. I'm very happy with my job now, and I have
no
an obligation.
plans.
I have an obligation to fulfill these duties every day at noon.
To my fans.
Yeah. But the budget reconciliation is a way. Is a very specific type of bill which only needs 50% plus one in the Senate, as opposed to you can't be filibustered. But there are specific rules about budget reconciliation. It has to do with, theoretically, we haven't gotten to this part yet. Theoretically, it needs to have to do with the budget of the U.S. government, like inflows and outflows. And the parliamentarian traditionally makes a determination of these things. There's also it also has to balance out, right? You can't have these things under. Is it the Byrd rule that says, or is the Byrd rule the one that says you have to have only
the
dealing
Byrd
with
rule
the
is about being germane to budgetary matters. There are also other rules involving neutrality in terms of revenue and spending. In the out years after the 10-year window, it all has to come together. But, I think what we're seeing is that a determined party can make those go away. And
those rules? No.
Rules.
I can't believe that. Those are ironclad. Yeah. Moses came down with those in the tablets, Chuck Schumer has told me.
Yes, it was thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, and the
minimum wage doesn't
must
impact
be neutral after the 10-year budget window.
And the minimum wage does not impact what the government makes or not.
Right.
The House, and the way it works with reconciliation, you've got to pass an overall resolution that basically gives you the parameters of spending and directs which committees, where they will make cuts or theoretically revenue, I guess, on some level. But and this resolution passed in the House about 3 weeks ago, and I think, or 4 weeks ago, much to people's surprise. It was happening around the continuing resolution, so it didn't get as much attention, but it was to people's surprise. And it is now in the Senate, and they are just about to pass it in the Senate. It's a Senate version, and they've got to come together and reconcile these. But just before we get into the details of it, and particularly the part about the baseline for the Trump tax cuts. What does it say to you that these resolutions passed in the way they did? Like, what does it say about the political climate that it was so easy for these things to pass?
Well, I wouldn't consider it easy. I mean, by this time
That it did.
Yes. I mean, this time 4 years ago, the American Rescue Plan actually was law.
Yep.
And we're still at step one of the budget resolution part of it. And I think what Republicans have sort of stumbled into as a strategy is the more decisions we can put off, the easier it's going to be to pass this shell of a budget resolution. So they have put in very wide parameters. They have deferred decision making, and that makes it a bit of a moving target. You can't say they're cutting Medicaid, but they're cutting $800 billion from the committee that has jurisdiction over Medicaid, and it would only make sense to cut $800 billion if they were cutting Medicaid. So it's a bit of it gives plausible deniability to those members. And then they're kind of like shading this in a way where different audiences get different messages. At one point this week, they were going to have $2 trillion or $3 trillion in cuts in the Senate committees, but only $3 billion in cuts in the House committees, which was a way to try to satisfy both constituencies until the House hardliners were like, "What? This is ridiculous. What do you mean we're only getting $3 billion in cuts?" It just kind of didn't make sense, right? But they're just sort of, deferring these hard questions that inevitably they'll have to make and answer and resolve until the latest possible moment. I think that's generally how they're looking at this. And so what you have, I mean, when you read these budget resolutions, there's not a whole lot to them. It just says,
very vague.
This committee will do this. We'll have a ceiling of X amount of dollars that it will reduce in spending. And this committee will have this much, and et cetera, et cetera. They're very vague, and they're intentionally vague in this case, even more so than a normal budget resolution, because they're trying not to inflame various factions of the Republican Party so that they will all come together and at least just advance this forward. The hard questions come later.
And those questions are going to be like, some people may not want to cut hundreds of billions from Medicaid. And others are now let's talk about the baseline thing, because this is the way it works generally is that you pass a law, and let's say you pass tax cuts for rich people, and your name is Donald Trump, and they sunset in 2026.
Let's talk about that, because I mean, the important thing is, why do they sunset, right? And the entire reason that they sunset is because of the budget reconciliation rules that we just talked about. So in 2017, they passed all these tax cuts. They cost, I think they were scored by the CBO's Congressional Budget Office as costing $1.5 trillion. Turns out they cost more like $2 or $3 trillion. But they all end abruptly in 2025. And the reason is that outside that 10-year window, everything needs to pencil out. Everything needs to be neutral in terms of the budgetary impact. And so they just end them so that those, very costly tax cuts don't affect the post 10-year window. So this is a game. It's been played many, many times. The Bush tax cuts expired. Yep. And then they were passed and made, So Donald Trump's rerunning this game, and he comes in and says, "I want to make these new the tax cuts that I did in 2017. I want to make them permanent." The way to make them permanent, they've now been scored at $4 trillion over 10 years. So the only way you can make them permanent is you find $4 trillion in offsetting spending under the rules, the alleged rules of reconciliation. You'd have to find $4 trillion in offsetting spending, which is very hard to do.
$4 trillion outside of that window, because these tax cuts will end.
That's right. So so how do you resolve this? How do you reconcile this? Well, there's two kinds of ways to look at these policies. This is almost like accounting in terms of the federal government. One way to look at it is the current law baseline. The law says these expire, therefore more revenue collection. And if you want to extend them, that will reduce that, revenue collection in those years after it's expired. And so those will cost the federal government $4 trillion, right?
Right. So just in other words, we passed these tax cuts in 2017. And if we look, let's say 20 years out, we have the tax cuts for whatever it was, 8-9 years. So less revenue, but then we have another 13 years of full revenue, as it were.
That's right.
And we put those monies together, and that's the way we determine 20 years out what the debt or the deficit will be, with other projections.
That's correct. So that's the current law baseline. But then there's another way of looking at these things, and they call that the current policy baseline. In other words, our policy right now is a tax code that was put into place in 2017 by Donald Trump. So if we just extend that, the policy is the same, which means they don't cost anything.
But it is basically saying, like, let's put it this way. If you moved those two decisions together in time, like, it's one thing where you say, like, okay, back in 2017, we're telling you over the course of the next 10 years, these tax cuts are going to cost $1 trillion. I'm just making up numbers, sort of what the CBO does anyways.
Yeah.
And, but if they said the next day, also, we're going to extend them, and so they're going to cost $2 trillion, everybody would be like, what are you doing? But because they've waited 7 or 8 years and just say, like, well, we're all used to this level of revenue right now, so let's just assume that it's going to continue this way. And so when we're getting rid of more revenue, when we're cutting more revenue to the U.S. government by cutting taxes, it doesn't feel like we're getting rid of that much more revenue, even though we said yesterday that we were including revenue that would follow after these 7 or 8 years or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's right. And so the question is whether this would be accepted by the powers that be, the parliamentarian. Because this is an untested use of the current.
And the parliamentarian has these supernatural powers to divine these things, and
music plays when the parliamentarian walks into a room.
And we have heard time and time again from Democratic lawmakers that the word of the parliamentarian is that of God.
Right, exactly. And so, this has never been tested. They've never done this in a budget reconciliation process to use a current policy baseline. And so there was this meeting.
Because it's a joke. It's ridiculous.
Because it's a gimmick. So there was this meeting set up where, the Republicans and the Democrats are going to come into the parliamentarian's office and make their case. And then the parliamentarian, in her infinite wisdom, would hand down a decision that would be binding on all. And then on Tuesday, Republicans canceled the meeting. They said, actually, what we can do is just say this isn't a decision that the parliamentarian gets to make. This is a decision that the chair of the Senate Budget Committee gets to make. And
I'm sure it's a very principled person. I'm sure that chairperson is a very principled person who would never ebb and flow based upon what, like, Donald Trump says. Who is that person?
Lindsey Graham.
Oh, my gosh.
Lindsey Graham is the Budget Committee chair. And so Lindsey Graham can make this decision. And if Democrats object to the decision, they can just dispense with that upon a majority vote. So we don't have to listen to the parliamentarian. Now, at the same time, Republicans in the Senate are actually saying we would never overrule the parliamentarian. That is not something we would do. We respect the parliamentarian. We respect her beliefs. She is the scorekeeper on this. We just don't have to go to her for the purpose of this one thing that helps us by about $4 trillion.
Wasn't there talk that the parliamentarian had to rule on whether they could bypass the parliamentarian for this? Honestly, that was.
I don't know about that.
I've heard that that it's a parliamentary question as to whether the Senate Finance Chair gets to decide. We're going to do a new accounting trick that basically works in our favor.
I'm sure there's going to be a point of order along those lines that Democrats might bring up. The point is that parliamentarian, this is like the Wizard of Oz when they rip off the curtain and it turns out the wizard is just a puny figure. The Republicans have decided we're not going to let the parliamentarian get in the way of our goals.
But they also did this for the Bush tax cuts. They dismissed the parliamentarian. They fired him.
Yes. Like this was a different matter, but the parliamentarian didn't allow certain elements of the Bush tax cuts to go in. So what Republicans did was they fired the parliamentarian and then put someone in much more favorable to their interests. And I think I know that if push came to shove on this matter, if they, turns out they have to go back to the parliamentarian, the parliamentarian rules against this, they would fire the parliamentarian and make Laura Loomer the parliamentarian. Like there's no question that they would find a way to achieve their goals. They do not see these, quaint, arcane structures of parliamentary procedure as a real obstacle.
I have to give you a pushback on one thing. I would hate to see Laura Loomer taken off of her post at national security.
That's true.
To leave the country unsafe in that regard.
I'm sure they could find someone else. We could probably brainstorm a top 5 parliamentarian substitutes that Donald Trump would pick.
Cory Booker, at one point during his holding the floor in the Senate, prior to his fundraising bonanza, he said something to the effect of like, they're going past, or Schumer's complained like, hey, can you believe they're going past the parliamentarian and no going back this time, right?
And the answer is, I can believe it.
Of course. Unbelievable to me. This is,
remark on the fact that Cory Booker does a 25-hour speech that is hailed as this, the stirrings of pushback by Senate Democrats that they're finally going to approach this administration, what's happening with the proper alarm and the state of emergency that it requires. And then literally 2 seconds after Booker gets off the floor, they ask unanimous consent to bring up a nomination and nobody objects.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I will say this though, the anti-urination technology that came out of what Booker did, I think is probably going to have.
Aren't you selling that in a live read?
It's actually it's a 6-hour digital course that we're doing. Lastly, let me ask you.
There's no regulatory enforcement anymore.
Exactly.
That works in your favor.
The projected revenue from tariffs, right? Navarro's going around $600 billion. Well, how much is it possible that they will use that figure? I mean, and say our tax cuts for billionaires, essentially millionaires, multi-hundred-thousandaires too, is offset by the $600 billion annually we anticipate bringing in from tariffs.
Well, it depends on what you mean by use. So in a strictly legislative sense, Trump has already put in place the tariff structure. How would a Congress who is passing a law say, we are going to offset X by doing something that's already in place? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So that's like legislatively, it seems like
no, I mean,
and in fact, there is no tariff invocation in any of the budget reconciliation bills. However, and I think I'm going to make your point at this point, rhetorically, it is absolutely the case that they are going to use this. In fact, what I suspect them to use is to call the extension of the Trump tax cuts economic stimulus. So we have destroyed the country. We have engaged in this self-inflicted wound. There's a recession right now. And we want to help our people. We don't want to put a $4 trillion tax increase on them right now at this point. So we're going to have to pass and extend these tax cuts because our people need help. Our people need economic stimulus. I think rhetorically, that is exactly what you're going to see.
But do you think they're going to say either rhetorically or even, I don't know if the CBO would even like sort of consider this, but we're projecting $600 billion a year, $6 trillion over 10 years. We're doing
that was an executive function. Like the legislature did not do anything.
But if they're calculating, but my point is, if they're calculating what revenue is going to be, they're looking at $600 billion more revenue. So that off the top, they could cut that in taxes and we'd still be revenue neutral at that point.
Yes, rhetorically, yes.
Okay.
The
within
large,
the piece of this legislation, they can't do it.
I think they can't use it as a literal offset, but a rhetorical offset, yes. There is certainly a faction of the MAGA world that wants to replace the income tax with tariffs. They look at the 1890s as the golden age of America. Even in his speech on Wednesday, yes, Donald Trump said, we started the income tax and then 20 years later we had a depression. We never would have had that if we didn't have an income tax and we kept doing tariffs. This is completely ahistorical, and it's putting, three things together. It's like, I wouldn't have fallen off that bicycle if I didn't have a smoothie in the morning.
Every crash has come after a car is driving. So
it's putting wildly disparate things together. But yes, this is a goal. And of course, what do you do when you replace a progressive income tax with a tariff, which is essentially a flat tax?
It's regressive.
On all goods. It's a regressive, it is a boon to the rich. By any dollar that goes away from the progressive tax system and into tariff collection is a boon for the wealthiest people in this country.
A flat tax is a regressive tax. If it's going to cost just use Peter Navarro's numbers. If they're going to generate $600 billion, that's $5,000 per family in the country. If I make $40,000 a year, that is whatever it is, essentially a 9% tax.
What you're saying is the majority report empire will be relatively unaffected by this tariffs because you're just making money hand over fist.
The money that's coming in here, that 5% will be.
YouTube shows like myself will be devastated by these tariffs. This is the power relationship we're talking.
Yes, but the point is that money is headed upward. Like this is a point that I think just like broad strokes, government is always redistributing money. Every single thing the government does redistributes money. And if you impose a tariff that is regressive by its very nature, a flat tax is regressive, because costs a lot less as a percentage of the wealth and the income of somebody making $1 million a year or $10 million a year or $50 million a year than it does if someone's making $40,000 or $60,000 or $70,000. And you're offsetting it, at least rhetorically, or at least the way you're selling it, at least the way that, lawmakers are going and justifying it by giving tax cuts to super wealthy people. This is just like a direct pipeline of the money from basically 90% of the country to the top 1%,
right.
5%.
And I think absolutely. And I think the way that people are talking about this, even the way that some progressives, I think, are talking about this as a failed industrial strategy, or yes, we agree that, tariffs are a tool in industrial policy, and if they're combined with other things and very targeted, that we can, in fact, bring back jobs and all that. It's all bunk. This is about replacing one tax system with another in ways that protect the rich. Certainly you probably have a lot of rich people crying right now because their investments are not doing so well. But on the other side, if they take the pain, which that's another theme that Trump's putting forward, that it'll be some short-term pain, the gain of, this great replacement, if you will, is to benefit the tax structures of the very rich.
At the very least, it's all just like either a cover for these massive tax cuts, or a way of just putting that obligation on.
And I think, by the way, just because I'm saying it's rhetorical rather than specifically legislative doesn't mean I don't think it's powerful. Like, I think the rhetoric might, in fact, even work, especially if we are seeing ourselves in an economic downturn in 6 months. The attraction of, we can just extend these tax cuts, not hurt our people more, like all of those things are going to weigh on certain Democrats. I think that's absolutely true, to the extent that you might even get 60 votes for it, like where you don't have to worry about these parliamentary games. I absolutely think that I don't know that it's a considered strategy, but Republicans are going to capitalize on the fact that there's an economic downturn, which they created,
right, to
pass a bunch of tax cuts. Because, think about what the stimulus was under Bush in 2008. It was tax cuts. And to an extent in 2020, the economic payments, they were just a bunch of tax cuts. So, so this is
even Obama's stimulus was
making
like 1/3 tax cuts at least.
All right. I have a question in our chat from Waldo. Can blue states bypass the tariffs, as Newsom stated? I have not seen what Gavin Newsom has said there. I think that would be rather difficult without sort of commandeering the ports and the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. I see little way that these tariffs can be circumvented at the state level. There is no question that there will be attempts to circumvent these tariffs, from a country level standpoint. One great case in point is that the EU tax cuts, or the EU tariff, is something like 20%, but the UK tariff is 10%. Now, Ireland is part of the EU, but Northern Ireland is part of the UK. So if I was an Irish exporter, I would certainly shuttle all my stuff up to Belfast and then send it out that way and save myself 10% on the tariff.
Got to use Trump trucks, though, for that. I'm in the trucking business now.
I'm being told that what Newsom has said is he's directed California to pursue strategic relationships with countries, announcing retaliatory tariffs against the U.S., urging them to exclude California-made products from those tariffs.
I see.
It's sort of a parallel.
We saw that
policy
with Canada. Canada did that when there were tariffs. They targeted bourbon to get Mitch McConnell essentially upset and pressure Trump in that instance. And this is sort of the reverse. Go ahead. How did we lose his audio? Hold on, we can't hear you.
Sorry, we had a technical difficulty.
Well, I mean, this is like, we're not used to dealing with smaller shows like this with that kind of technology. So
I can barely afford the basic tools because I'm being crushed by a monopolist who thinks that, 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. they own for some reason.
There you go. Well, that's why nobody's selling you a proper microphone because of our monopsony in the microphone business between 12 and 3.
Look, I've tried to make the purchases, and they say, "Look, Sam said I can't sell to you," and I think it's a good strategy for you. I'm not saying not to do it, but
I learned it. I learned it from
tough for the rest of us out there.
I learned it from stuff I probably read that you wrote about monopsonies. It's just that it was also a recipe for it to be.
So you were reading it and you were saying, "Oh, this is horrible. We need to make policy changes." But also, let me take some notes here.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah,
exactly what happened. All right, let's take a look at this because we've been talking about how problematic these sort of imposed tariffs are going to be. All of the downturn in our economy that it may, but we're not talking about any of the positives. So let's talk. Let's hear this clip from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who is expressing how this is going to usher in a new, more beneficial age for all of us. And of course, just reminder, this is the same guy who said his grandmother, his mother-in-law, who's 97 years old, would not care if her Social Security checks did not show up. And of course, she lives in his mansion with him, but there it is. Okay, here's Howard Lutnick on with Jesse Waters explaining how great this is going to be.
All right.
We're not going to have all factories come back. Like clothing manufacturing, that's tough to bring back. But what kind of manufacturing are you talking about returning here?
Well, you can't just give that away. See, what's going to happen is robotics are going to replace the cheap labor that we've seen all across the world. I mean, think of what our factories did. They went to the cheapest labor in the whole world, slave labor, cheap labor, the worst environmental conditions, polluting the heck out of it. And then we bring back those cheap products here and we feel good about ourselves because we don't see the pain. But the pain is in our workers. The American workers have been given the raw deal. And what's going to happen now is we're going to build factories and we're going to train and we're going to have trade craft. We're going to do the greatest set of training ever. And our high school educated people, they're going to train to do robotics mechanics. It's kind of like a supercharged BMW mechanic, like you just can fix those robots. You can build air conditioning as an example, but that's for a fab or for a semiconductor factory. These are great paying jobs that are Americans. We're going to have 5 million of those jobs coming. And America is going to retool. It's going to do manufacturing, and robotics can sew as well. You've never seen anything like what you're going to see, the renaissance of American manufacturing coming because Donald Trump is bringing them back. He's driving them back. $6 trillion, he said today, he's got committed to America. It's unbelievable.
It really is unbelievable.
It is unbelievable in that it cannot be believed.
So how long do you think it's going to take before we get 5 million jobs from high school students who are going to be trained to repair the robotic factories that are producing all of our clothing?
Yeah, it's a nation of robot mechanics is what we're going to be.
I mean, that is the best case scenario. How long? That's what he's selling as our sort of nirvana. Yeah. But it also
because
feels
I think I
feel like we're a couple of years off from that. Well, do you think that will happen within 18 months or 36 months?
It was interesting because I think as he launched into that, he realized the huge error that he made. He's like, oh, well, we can take all these factories back because they're not going to have any people in them. Oh, wait, if they don't have any people in them, then this isn't good for me. What's the value of the factory? And then, but we're going to fix the robots that are going to make all the things. So that'll get us 5 million jobs, right?
How many robot fixers do you think would be working in each factory?
What does the robot fixing industry look like? And why can't the robots fix them? Why can't, if the robots can sew and they can do all these other things, why can't they fix the robots?
Well, but then there's going to be another person fixing the robots that fix the robots.
That's right.
So we're going to move. There's going to be an evolution here. And believe me, it's going to be painful when we move from robot fixer to robot fixer. Right. That
That's
is
right.
going to be one of the more painful transitions that we'll be making.
But it will be just.
It'll be environment, because the Trump administration is very concerned about the environment, and that's what is going on here. I mean, this is, it's possible there'll be something like that in the future where we will reshore some manufacturing because it's cheap that it's.
To an extent, that already represents certain advanced manufacturing industries. Like, yes, one of the reasons why you see a reduction in manufacturing employment in the United States is that many things have been automated. That doesn't mean that it creates like this huge cottage industry and robot fixers, but we have seen these factories get more automated, and in theory, that higher productivity per worker should be good for the working class. It will
be good for the capitalist class that will take all of the benefits of that.
This was my point. This was my point. Like, in theory, that's good for the workers, unless somebody else owns all the robots and takes all the benefits. Yes.
And again, are we anticipating this is going to happen in June, or like what? Do we have a notion of what month this is going to be?
This is like when I put out my second book, Monopolized, and it was during the pandemic, and the book was scheduled to come out in June of 2020, and they said, you know what? There's a pandemic. A lot of people are getting sick. I don't think we're going to be able to do like live events. Let's make it July. Let's put it off till July. And that's when the book was released. So I think it's similar to that in that June might be a little hard to put in this robot fixer army and train them up. How about July?
Let's talk about what's happening with the Senate. We have Wisconsin, and this is the last thing. We have Wisconsin that happened this week, and then these tariffs. Right. Let's go first with Ron Johnson, since he is from Wisconsin. I do not think I have seen Ron Johnson say a negative word about Donald Trump since the day that Donald Trump ran and Ron Johnson became a senator. Ron Johnson, until Tommy Tuberville came to the Senate, considered the most stupid senator in the Senate. I mean, that's by his peers. Al Franken had mentioned this to us a while back, and I believe it. This guy basically admitted to being part of the scheme for the January 6th without realizing it, and blamed it on an intern or something in his office. But here he is. The one thing that can sharpen the mind is sort of like a near miss, or a sense that you're headed down, that there's a waterfall in front of you in the boat. And here is Ron Johnson responding about Trump's tariffs.
I'm concerned. The stock markets are concerned. I'm concerned.
You are concerned about the stock market?
Yeah, again, I don't have the president's strongly held belief that this is absolutely what has to be done. But he's president. I'm not. He ran on this, and I hope he's absolutely right.
And if he's not, then what happens next? What can Congress do?
That's hypothetical. I can't.
That's hypothetical. He said, I just want to be clear. I don't have the president's strongly held belief that this is something that absolutely has to be done.
That is like the most euphemistic way of expressing opposition.
And then of course, like, what happens if he doesn't change? That's a hypothetical. I can't possibly that's complete conjecture. I can't possibly.
Well, look, I mean, Johnson comes from a Rust Belt state that has, some residual manufacturing in it. He's going to be most sensitive to, the anger and anguish that is going to come from this. There are a lot of manufacturing facilities, a lot of auto parts manufacturers in Wisconsin.
I wouldn't be surprised if they send some dairy to Canada's way and may get some retaliatory tariffs. And also, he just saw essentially midterm level elections in that Supreme Court race, and the Republican got wiped out.
Yeah, and he's not up next year. He's not out until 2028. He's would be his next election. But yeah, still, it's a problem. I mean, you saw this week Dan Osborne in Nebraska say that he was going to explore a run in the other Nebraska Senate seat against a guy named Pete Ricketts, which is just perfect, like named after a 19th century disease. So Dan Osborne lost by 7 points, just 6.5 points in 2024 in a pretty good Republican year.
Yep.
The swing that we saw in Wisconsin right now would put him into office.
And is that race in 2 years? The Ricketts race?
That race is next year.
Oh,
yeah.
boy. That's the 26 race. Oh, I would be very nervous if I had Ricketts.
If you had Ricketts or
Here
the Gauss.
is Ted Cruz, of all people. Now, Ted Cruz, known for his strong stance against Donald Trump, and then completely like doing one of the most incredible double Lindys that have ever existed in politics. But here he is, Ted Cruz, coming out of like what semi-retirement, and we should say he's not saying this on his podcast. He's actually saying it to Larry Kudlow.
Look, I think it is a mistake to assume that we will have high tariffs in perpetuity. I don't think that would be good economic policy. I am not a fan of tariffs. And the announcement yesterday, look, time is going to tell in the next month or 2 or 3 what happens. If the result of yesterday's announcement is a lot of our trading partners across the globe dramatically reduce the tariffs they charge on U.S. goods and services, and the consequence of that is the U.S. government dramatically cuts the tariffs that were announced yesterday, that would be a great outcome. That would be good for America. If the result is our trading partners jack up their tariffs and we have high tariffs everywhere, I think that is a bad outcome for America. Tariffs are a tax on consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers. So my hope is these tariffs are short-lived and they serve as leverage to lower tariffs across the globe.
So we know that the tariffs that they put on that document that they handed around was not really the tariffs. What are the chances are that somebody's just going to go into the White House and say, guess what? All of the countries lowered their tariffs, President Trump. And he's like, perfect. Okay, then we can lower ours. And they just take this as like as a big win.
Well, I mean, and again, I don't think we should look at these as tariffs, but if you look at what this tariff schedule implies, it says essentially the only way to get to zero is to have balanced trade with every country on earth, and balanced in every context, not just an overall balance of trade, but literally like we have to have balanced trade with Suriname. And we have to have balanced trade with Venezuela, and we have to have balanced trade with every single country on earth.
They got to buy more of our bananas.
It's impossible. And by the way, if you go back to that clip, look at what the Chiron says. Look at what the lower third says. It said
this is one with Cruz.
Trump's tariffs spark demand for tax cuts. It's exactly what we were talking about. In a rhetorical
sense. Pop this back up, Matt. We'll take a look at it. Fascinating. They're already on it.
Trump's tariffs spark increased calls for tax cuts. Increased calls by whom? By Republicans who want to pass their tax cuts and who now see at least the silver lining of an opportunity to do so. Rhetorically.
And I should say, though, I don't think Larry Kudlow has ever been on television, and he's had shows on CNBC and Fox where the Chiron doesn't say calls for tax cuts.
Right. They literally have a macro where they're just like calls for tax cuts. And it's it's very easy on the Chiron operator.
Yes, exactly.
Behind the scenes.
The Chiron operator has more time to head out and maybe get Larry a scotch, and doesn't have to put anything in it. Okay. David Dayen, it's been a real pleasure.
This was great. It was great to do the simulcast. Our people are happy. Your people are happy. We do a show. I'm sorry, sir, Lord Seder. We do a show on Fridays from 12:30 to 1:30. It's usually members of our staff talking about the news of the day, talking about our articles that we post at prospect.org. We also post that video after the fact, and you can watch it on our website at prospect.org. So if you love the Majority Report, you can't miss a word that Sam says in live real time.
Yep.
You can go back and you can watch our show after and glean some insights there. There's room for everybody.
100%. And I think you have made a very compelling argument why it would really be great of you guys to start at 1:30, because like you say,
or 2:30,
you're on demand,
or 4 in the morning when we could be live.
You have this newfangled on-demand service from YouTube. And you could you could start your show live at 1:30, and then you could be back into the regular rotation on Fridays, just like the old days.
You're just so nostalgic for the past. You're like Trump in a way. You're looking for a time, and we've moved on in 1:30. We need to innovate.
1:30. It's an old word, 1:30. That I just am bringing it back. Everybody's saying 1:30 now. 1:30 this, 1:30 that. Eastern.
Yeah, the old
Eastern. Who says
1:30
Eastern?
in groceries.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
David Dayen, always a pleasure. Thanks,
All right,
man.
thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
We'll do this again. This was fun.
Yeah, we should. All right. Good.
All right. Bye.
Folks, going to head into the fun half of the program. It's late. It was a long show. David Dayen, but we got a lot of stuff. What? Oh, yes. Also, just a reminder, this program sponsored by my favorite sponsor, Sunset Lake Sebede.com. Use the code LEFTISBEST for 20% off. What do you get with 20% off? Well, you can get off, they got new vape pens. Great way to get your Sebede after, have you been? You were making a move for that. Matt uses them. They have leaf and they have flour, rather, I should say, and keef, and you can mix it with other things. Wait, is that a Delta?
Delta 9?
Oh, my God. Should be taking that right now. That is already planning for the show to be over. I literally just watched them take a 7-day. Like, I've got the Focus gummies here, and I'll take those before.
Oh, that's what I thought these were too.
Matt just popped a 7-day Delta 9. They also have some with THC, which is, I guess Matt feels fairly confident that they'll take.
It's good for productivity.
They also have fudge and 7-day coffee and tinctures and stuff to help you sleep. They're all of their products third-party tested. They use great farming practices, regenerative farming. They use no pesticides. They use integrated pest management. They're great movement partners. They've donated thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to things like refugee relief, Planned Parenthood, strike relief funds, carceral reform, the food pantries, and Give Directly. And they've engaged in mutual aid up in Vermont. Just a great company. And longtime fans of the show, Left is Best, 20% off all these products. Check it out. Texas Left just said, I take a few Sunset Lake Sebede at work all the time. Yeah, but Matt is taking the Sebede with the Delta 9, and that is a little bit different than just the straight Sebede.
You are having an emotional breakdown right now.
Oh, my God. We're going to take a break in a moment and head to the fun half, and then we'll probably come back with trance music. Folks, also don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, and hot chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off of that. And if you want to help this show survive and thrive, join themajorityreport.com, join themajorityreport.com. Become become a member today. Don't forget, handsoff2025.com. Big protests happening all around the country on Sunday. And again, I also want to thank Isaac Liebler, who's been doing our social media now for several years. Great job. He's heading off to greener pastures. Matt, Left Reckoning.
Yeah, Left Reckoning, where we are about like 20 shy of 1,000 paying Patreon members at patreon.com/Left Reckoning. For those 900 or so Patreon members, we're going to have a talk with Luke Savage of Jacobin about the abundance agenda. So check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
Oh, wait, the protest is tomorrow?
The 5th, I think, right? Yeah.
Oh, it's tomorrow the 5th. Okay. The protest is tomorrow. Oh, my gosh. Saturday, April 5th. Oh, shoot. I thought it was Sunday. Hands Off 2025. Protests are happening tomorrow. All right, quick break. Fun half.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow.
What? What is that going on? It's nuts.
Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?